Good afternoon, grade 12S. Today we'll move on to the second part of our topic on human reproduction. Last video we talked about pregnancy, twin pregnancies, and breastfeeding. And today we're gonna talk about different contraceptive methods that can be used to prevent pregnancy. Okay, so let's get started. Let's start off with a definition of what contraception is. Contra- Contraception is basically any procedure or medication that is going to prevent conception. Now, conception is the scientific term for pregnancy. Okay. Now, in order for this to occur, different contraceptive methods are going to do one of the following. Either it's going to prevent the sperm from reaching the egg, or it's going to prevent an egg from being produced in the first place. Now, if you guys remember when we talked about the menstrual cycle and ovulation, you should recall that ovulation occurs 2 weeks after menstruation. Remember, menstruation is just another word for period. Okay, so approximately 2 weeks after the first day of bleeding, ovulation will occur. Ovulation is the release of an egg cell from the ovaries. Okay, so one of the ways that contraceptive devices work or techniques is that it's going to prevent ovulation. Because if you don't have an egg in the first place, then once again, pregnancy cannot occur. Okay, so that's two ways that these contraceptive devices work. The last method we're going to talk about is called basically preventing implantation from occurring. All right, but I'll talk about that, later on in the presentation. Okay, so like I was saying earlier, this is one of the ways that contraception is going to work. It is going to prevent a sperm cell from reaching an egg. Or another way that it can work is that it's going to prevent the production of an egg. Because if you don't have an egg cell, then there's nothing there for the sperm cell to fertilize, and therefore pregnancy will not occur. With this step here, basically you have a barrier that is going to prevent these sperm cells from reaching the egg. Once again, preventing pregnancy from occurring. So these first two methods basically prevent a sperm cell and an egg cell from fusing with one another and creating a zygote. Now the last one is called implantation. Now with implantation, we would have talked about this when we was talking about the 6 different steps of human reproduction. Now I would have talked about this in one of my earlier Zoom classes. So if you guys missed that, you would probably have to read up on that chapter. But anyhow, with this method here, it basically prevents implantation from occurring. So this short animation basically shows what implantation is. Just to have a quick recall, implantation occurs after an egg cell has been fertilized by a sperm cell. Once they fuse, that is going to create something called a zygote. Okay, and then this zygote is going to move into the uterus where it's going to implant itself into the lining of the uterus. So this is what implantation is. Once this occurs, we call this the beginning of the pregnancy. So this is when pregnancy has officially started. We also call this conception. Okay, so this is when pregnancy is going to occur. So I'll play this animation once again. And you could think of implantation almost as if you're planting a seed inside the soil. The seed in this case would be the zygote or the fertilized egg cell, and the soil would be the lining of the uterus. So implantation is just basically when this zygote is going to implant itself into the lining of the uterus. And once this occurs, we say that pregnancy has started or that conception has occurred. So I'll play this animation for you again. So this is the zygote, this is the wall of the uterus, and it is implanting itself into the uterus. So this is what we call implantation. Okay, so this is another way that contraception will work. It's going to prevent implantation from happening. If you prevent implantation from happening, then there will be no pregnancy. Because remember we said that when implantation occurs, we say that pregnancy or conception has occurred. Okay, so if you prevent this step from happening, there will be no pregnancy. Okay, so try to keep that in mind because a lot of people have this, I guess, misconception that, you know, once an egg is fertilized by a sperm cell, pregnancy starts. At that step, we just call that fertilization. In order for pregnancy to occur, this zygote or the fertilized egg that you see here has to move into the uterus and implant itself into the lining or the walls of the uterus. So once this happened, this zygote is then going to develop into an embryo, and then it's going to go through various different stages of development during the pregnancy over a course of 9 months. So once this happens, it's going to start growing into a fetus. All right, so going back to my main point, some contraception devices or medication are going to prevent this step from happening. So if you prevent this step from happening, then that is also going to prevent pregnancy from occurring, which is the overall goal of contraception. Okay. So we talked about how, you know, these different contraception devices or methods are going to generally work. Either it's going to prevent a sperm from reaching an egg, or it's going to prevent the production of an egg cell, or lastly, it's going to prevent implantation from occurring. Okay, so this picture here just basically shows different contraception methods. Okay, so you have a condom here, female condom. You also have oral contraceptives, which are basically birth control pills. All right. You can also use a IUD, which is an intrauterine device. Okay, I'll talk more about, you know, how these devices work. All right. You also have something called a diaphragm cap, but at the end of the presentation, we'll know more about all these different methods. But when it comes to contraception methods, you can generally put them into 4 categories. You have a natural method. With a natural method, this is a method that is not going to use any chemicals or any devices. Okay, you have a mechanical method. With a mechanical method, basically, you are going to use a device that's either going to physically block the path of a sperm from reaching the egg cell. So that's going to basically stop the sperm from reaching the egg cell. Or it can also basically interfere with the lining of the uterus, but we'll talk more about that later on. And also you have a diaphragm cap, which is something else that's also going to prevent a sperm from reaching the egg. But I will go more in detail as I continue on with this lesson. Now with chemical methods, you know, as the name implies, this is going to use some type of chemical to basically prevent pregnancy from occurring. Okay, so an example of this would be, you know, birth control pills. These pills basically have artificial hormones inside of them, and that's basically going to interfere with the menstrual cycle in some way, and that's going to prevent ovulation from happening. But I'll go more in detail, you know, as I continue on with this lesson once again. And lastly, we have surgical methods. Okay, so with surgical methods, a surgery is going to occur. either to the male, where they'll basically cut the sperm duct of the male, and that would stop, sperm from reaching the urethra. Or you can also have a tubal ligation, also called tying the tubes inside a woman. Okay, so that's basically going to prevent an egg from being released into the fallopian tubes. But I'll touch on that more towards the end of the lesson. Okay, so the first method we're going to talk about is called the natural method. Now, like I said earlier, with the natural method, this is not going to use any chemicals or any devices. Okay, so this is also called the rhythm method. And the primary way that this is going to work is that two things are going to have to happen. One, you're going to have to use the withdrawal method, which is basically removing the penis from the vagina before it ejaculates. All right, so that's step one with this method here. Secondly, you're going to avoid periods of the month where a female would be most fertile. Okay, we all know the most fertile part of the month is ovulation. Okay, so basically you have to combine these two techniques in order for this method to work. Now, this method here is the least effective contraceptive method. Okay, so I think it's supposed to be 70% effective if done correctly. Okay, which is really not that much, because that's if it's done correctly. If it's done incorrectly, pregnancy will likely occur, which is why, once again, I say that this is the least effective method. Even when done correctly, pregnancy, there's still a large error, a large margin of error for pregnancy to occur. And another downfall of this method is that it does not protect against any STDs. Okay, so that's basically what the rhythm or the natural method is about. Now, going back to my second point where I said it avoids the fertile periods of the month. There are different techniques that a person can use to help to predict when this fertile period of the month is. But notice I said that it's a prediction. Okay, so this is when a person is going to try estimate when they think that a person is not fertile. Okay, there's three ways that this can be done. You have something called the calendar method, you have a temperature method, and then you have the mucus method. The first one I'm going to talk about is called the calendar method. Okay, so for you to understand this, you probably should, I guess, review over, the menstruation or the menstrual cycle. But I'll try to explain that right here. And then I'd still, advise you to read over that part again. But basically, with the calendar method, remember that at the beginning of the menstrual cycle, that's when the period is going to occur. Okay, so that's day one. Approximately 2 weeks after this happened, that is when a female is going to ovulate. Ovulate or ovulation is basically the release of an egg cell from the ovaries. Okay, remember that this happens about once a month. Okay, at the end of 2 weeks after menstruation happens, one egg cell is going to be released from the ovaries. Once again, this is called ovulation. All right, so with the calendar method, recall that menstruation happens at the beginning of the month or day one. Okay, and ovulation is going to occur approximately 2 weeks after that. So that's going to be around day 14. All right, so remember with the natural method, basically two things are being done. You're using the withdrawal method, and you're also doing that only in the times where a female is not fertile. Okay, so you're doing two things. You're using the withdrawal method or the removal of the penis from the female before ejaculation occurs, and you're only able to do this during times of the month that you predict that she is not fertile. So basically what you're trying to avoid with the calendar method is you're going to avoid from day 11 to day 17, because during this time, the female is going to be the most fertile, okay? Now, the reason why she is the most fertile is because this is when ovulation occurs. This is when an egg cell has been released from the ovaries. In order for fertilization and then pregnancy to occur, you need there to be one, a sperm cell, and you also need there to be an egg cell, okay? So an egg cell is going to be released around this time here, okay? So this is going to be the most fertile time of the month. Now, another reason why this method is not effective is because remember, this is just a prediction, okay? Now with this one here, this is using the calendar method to predict when you think the female is going to be fertile, okay? So with certain, females, they might ovulate on day 13. They might ovulate on day 15. So basically this entire area right here is just an estimate of when you think a female might be their most fertile. Another thing to take into consideration with this method here is that the lifespan of a sperm is between 3 to 5 days, and the lifespan of an egg cell is about 1 day. Okay, so going back to the calendar method here, if a female ovulates on day 14, then that means that if a sperm cell was released 4 days prior to this, then pregnancy can occur. Okay, so if sex was to happen during this time period here, pregnancy would occur. Okay, because like I said, these sperms can live for up to 5 days. Okay, so if it was to happen on day 11, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so that's still enough. That's still within the period where the female would be fertile. Okay, same thing if sex would occur on day 12 or day 13. So basically from day 11 to 17, this is when sex would have to be completely avoided if a person was to use the natural or the rhythm method. So basically they would only have from days 1 to 10 and day 18 to 28. This would be the only days when a person using the natural method only as a well, for persons who are only using this contraceptive method, these would be the only days that they would be allowed to have sex. So basically with the natural or the rhythm method, they are going to be restricted from having sex on certain days, and that would be during those days where the female would be the most fertile. Okay, so I guess to re-explain this one more time, remember with the natural or the rhythm method, two things are occurring. You're using the withdrawal method, and you're only using this withdrawal method on days when the female is not fertile, okay? Now, with the calendar method, this is one method of trying to predict when the female is going to be fertile, okay? Ovulation occurs on day 14, or 2 weeks after the period would have first occurred. So this is when an egg cell is going to be released. An egg cell has a lifespan of only 1 day, okay? So if it's released on day 14, then the egg would already died by the end of day 15, okay? Now the reason why day 16 and 17 is still, considered a fertile day is because remember I said this is an estimate, all right? A female's body is going to be different compared to another female. Okay, so they might have ovulated on day 14. They might ovulate on a day 13. They might have ovulated on day 15 or 16. Okay, this is an estimate. This is another reason why this method is not that reliable, because you're trying to take a guess. So that's why these extra days are added on, because using the calendar method, a person can't say with certainty, which day that a female might ovulate. So basically, it takes that into consideration, and it also takes into consideration the fact that a sperm cell lives for 5 days. So basically, you're gonna have a period of days that you're trying to avoid. Okay, so you wouldn't want a person who's using a natural method. They wouldn't want to have sex within 3 days of ovulation happening, and they wouldn't want to have sex 3 days after ovulation happens. So in total, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. In total, that's basically 7 days that they're trying to prevent from having sex in order for this method to be somewhat effective. But remember, I said that out of all the contraceptive methods, this method is going to be the least effective. So basically, to calculate this, you have to figure out when ovulation is going to occur, which is approximately 2 days. And with this calendar here, they're using the lifespan of a sperm to be about 3 days. Remember, I said it could be from 3 to 5 days. Okay, so to calculate the fertility window, first you have to pick an ovulation date. Remember, I said that ovulation occurs around 2 weeks after the first day of your period for a female. So this will basically be about day 14. So after you have this day here, then you're going to add and subtract the lifespan of a sperm. Now with this calendar right here, it used the lifespan of a sperm to be 3 days. So you will be subtracting 3 days, taking you to day 11, and adding 3 days, which takes you to day 17. So basically, that's how you calculate the fertility window. Now, if you were to use, 5 days of the life as the lifespan of a sperm, then that would add additional days. That'll probably take you from day 9 to day 19. Okay, so that's basically how you would calculate the fertility window. Okay, so yeah, basically the general gist of this method is to predict when you think a female might be most fertile and to avoid having sex during that time. Okay, so hypothetically, from days 1 to 10, a person would be safe to use the withdrawal method, as well as from days 18 to 28. But once again, I'll stress that this is the least effective method, because it's hard to tell when a person is actually ovulating. All right. Now, so far, this is only the calendar method of predicting when a female is going to be fertile. You still have 2 other methods. You have something called the temperature method. Okay, so with the temperature method, basically, when a female is ovulating or when she's most fertile, their temperature tends to increase a little bit. So on those days when a female temperature, is a little bit higher, they would say that, ovulation is about to occur. So basically, with someone using the temperature method, they basically have to take their temperature every single day for probably a period of a couple of months until they, I guess, get used to, their fluctuations of temperature throughout the month. And what they're looking for is basically a time period, which is still going to be around 2 weeks, after menstruation would have happened. And if they see a temperature rise, they would use that to basically predict that they are most fertile on those days where they have a slight temperature rise. But, just from listening to that, that doesn't sound too reliable. So once again, this is why, the rhythm method is referred to as the least effective method, because, there could be a bunch of different reasons why someone's temperature might fluctuate, throughout a given month. You shouldn't really, put your bet on that. And you also have something called the mucus method. And with this method, remember the cervix basically releases, mucus during various times of the month. And basically, the mucus is going to have a certain consistency around the time that a female is about to start ovulation. Okay, there's also going to be periods when the cervix doesn't release as much mucus. We call that a dry period. So basically, with the mucus method, a female would have to basically create a little log or basically a journal where they would basically examine, the mucus on a daily basis to see how it changes throughout the course of a month. And during the period of the month when the mucus would have a certain consistency and color, a clear color, then they would know that ovulation is about to occur. So they will avoid using the natural or river method around that time. They would basically avoid having sex around that time because that would be the window when she would be the most fertile. Okay, so to recap, with the natural or river method, like I said, several times, this is the least effective method. With this method here, a person is restricted to having sex during the safe period of the month. I notice I have safe, in quotation marks because, this is a prediction. You really shouldn't really put a bet on this because it's going to be extremely hard to tell when a female is actually ovulating. Okay, that's going to be very difficult for the average person to determine with accuracy. And with the natural or river methods, you have three different techniques to determine when the safe period is. Okay, you had the temperature method, you had the mucus method, and you had the calendar method. Okay, so these are just different methods to predict when a female is going to be their most fertile. And on these days here, someone who is solely relying on the natural or the river method or the withdrawal method, they will have to completely avoid these days in order to prevent pregnancy. And another disadvantage of the natural or river method is that, this method does not use any protection. Okay, so no condoms are used with this method here. So that would obviously expose the person to STDs. Okay, so that's another disadvantage on top of it being the least effective method. All right, now when it comes to hypothetical advantages, this method is free and there's no chemicals used. And the disadvantage is that this is going to be the most riskiest method. It's not that effective, and a person can also get STDs. Now, another, I guess, natural method of using contraception would be abstinence. Now, the reason why I call this a natural method is because, no chemicals are being used and no devices are being used. With abstinence, the person is just basically, not having sex at all. And this is the only contraceptive method that is 100% effective.